All right. So I'm back. Um, at some point, I'm going to go back into the origin of that little. All right. It's kind of funny, and but not for this video. So anyway, I'm going to do another blue review, and I'm going to do another extreme and forgotten. So this one is basically going to be a lot of anecdotes and kind of ephemeral information because the films themselves are very experimental. They're really mostly non-narrative films. They're art films. They're short films. Um, they're not feature narrative films. They're definitely not commercial or mainstream. But they're some of my favorite films that I've ever seen, and they're not on Blu-ray yet. And I got to tell you, I'm pissed off about it. Except the fact I'm completely broke right now. If you want to help me out and help the channel out, you can read the directions in the information below the video screen. But I'm glad they're not out because I'm broke. But I cherish them, so it's a video I'm not selling. These were compiled in different forms over the years until finally, they were shot in the 1950s, 1960s, and in different forms. And then Genesis P-Orridge, founding member of Throbbing Gristle and Psychic TV, the bands, who coined the term industrial music, and also created the term acid house and house music. Extremely influential electronic music pioneer, and also a brilliant thinker. He was definitely up there with Robert Anton Wilson, Colin Wilson, people who are like philosophers and existentialists, and he was on to Aleister Crowley, and one of his big, if not biggest influence was William S Burroughs. And so he managed to compile, with some of his Psychic TV fundage, a DVD of all of these films together. These were floating around first in bootleg forms. I got them on VHS in 1992, and I was just getting into William Burroughs. I was reading The Ticket That Exploded. And a guy I used to be really good friends with, the first time I ever met him, I'd heard about him for years. He was really integral to bringing a lot of experimental music and shit and ideas and things to Charlotte. And he didn't really fit in with anybody. He had a reputation. He was a very romantic guy. He broke some hearts. He had his heart broken. There are all these weird stories about him, and I never really knew how to reconcile them. And then I met him, and we had kind of a connection. He was a Pisces. I'm a Cancer. Early in my life, I had strong connections with Pisces. I've only had one strong connection with the Pisces in recent times. I still have one Pisces prominent friend, Reggie Dennis. Reggie Dennis! He's a great regional musician here in the Carolinas. Buddy of mine for many years. Also into cool shit. Also a great astrologer. Anyway, so I met this guy, John, and he sold me this. He was selling a lot of his collectibles and esoteric stuff, and I was just getting into that stuff, submerge into it. So one I bought was a collection of these films featuring William S Burroughs, these experimental films. And I think the tape he had a white cover, black and white cover, and it had the Psychic TV symbol, which is like a skull, and then their Psychic cross, which is like, this is the vertical, and there's a small horizontal, a long horizontal, small horizontal. Now, I used to know exactly the esoteric significance of that symbol. It's still buried somewhere in my brain. I can only retain so much on a instant retention level. But it's a cool thing. It's basically bisecting, but I can't remember what kind of properties or attributes that are being bisected by the Psychic cross. John, in one of his bits of selling stuff, he gave me a whole ton of correspondence he had with people like Genesis and like David Tibet, who started out in Genesis's band, current Psychic TV. He was the founding member of Psychic TV, and then David Tibet went on to do his project called Current 93, which he's still doing to this day with a variety of collaborators. It's mainly him. I used to have a lot of Current 93 stuff on CD and a few on vinyl. Downloaded, I've been reacquiring my entire library and expanding it digitally, and it's amazing. Current 93 is one I haven't gotten around to restoring all of them yet. And of course, since those days, like the mid to late '90s, when I collected so much Current 93 and Psychic TV, um, tons of more stuff has come out. I've got a lot of Psychic TV digitally now, and I have all the Throbbing Gristle. That's essential to me. They're a seminal band, and the company Research Books, which was created by V. Vale, a Japanese American punk rocker, and his girlfriend Andrea Juno in the late '70s. They shaped a lot of things in underground and independent culture, and they hooked up with Genesis P-Orridge, and they put out a book. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to show you this book. Thanks. Hello again. Yeah, I have some visual aids I want to share. First, I'm going to continue my thought here. Research put out this book, I think toward the end of the '80s. William S. Burroughs, Throbbing Gristle, Brion, Gysin. That's the Throbbing Gristle symbol, the lightning bolt through the red and black. Very impressive. The lightning bolt has always been an impressive symbol. The Nazis kind of adapted it with their SS, and then superheroes like Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, and Adam Warlock. It was their symbol. Very mystical shit. Of course, classic picture of Mr. Burroughs. Mr. Burroughs is one of my, heroes. I'm just going to say it unabashedly. He's had a tremendous influence. Another person who is primarily known as a novelist, but also like a speaker and a pop culture figure. And, he's done some music recordings and spoken word. He's appeared in some movies. But like Genesis P-Orridge, I think he's primarily a philosopher. I think they're modern, or they're postmodern, post-industrial philosophers. And, Genesis is British, Burroughs is American. And they really, to me, their works, they understood the zeitgeist of the times that they lived in and times to come. They were prophetic in a lot of ways. This stuff really elevated my consciousness. It made me think outside of the linear Aristotelian thought mode, the A, B, everything has to be a certain way. Because that's what I was told in my youth, is that everything has to be a certain way. You have to do this, you have to go to college, you have to look this way, you have to play the game, you can't do this, you can't do that. I'm thinking of a few ones like that movie Last House on Dead End Street, where the guy gets out of prison at the beginning. He's like, I hated all the authority, do this, do that, clean up after yourself, and he's like talking about all the demands that were placed on him, and he just wanted to rebel. And, all this kind of authoritarianism, and it's creeping back into our world now in a massive way. The world could use William S. Burroughs and Genesis. They're both deceased now. So yeah, this book is wild. It's interviews and it's essays and stuff about and by William Burroughs. Well, of course, Throbbing Gristle. But what's important to what we're covering today, here's Genesis P-Orridge, a crazy picture. Unlike Genesis, his real name was Neil Andrew Megson. He was born in 1950, and he was a hippie and a punk rocker. He was a performance artist, an extreme performance artist in the early '70s. He and his girlfriend, Posey Fanny Tootie, can't remember her birth name. It's not important. A great musician and guitarist, and just a wild chick. And they did all these extreme performance art pieces together. Some of them were printed, published, and were held in galleries, and then some were held live and filmed. And I don't have any footage of their performances. There's a lot of performance art footage I really want. I've got a lot of the material action stuff. That was a huge fetish of mine for a while. I wrote an article called Material Action Madness for a defunct, great a national magazine called iMagazine. They went belly up in the early 2000s. They were based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but they were nationally distributed. That gave me a lot of exposure. I did 2 feature articles, one on the material action and one on Kimba the White Lion, which is on my personal website still. I love the material action and the actionism, Austria and the area. I've got a lot of those videos. I've got a DVD that has most of the key films by Kurt Kren and Otto Mule, the primary visionaries. But then there's people like Herman Nish, I don't have films of any of his stuff. His stuff is really extreme. He's got a lot of animal slaughter and stuff in his ritualistic kind of bacchanalian rituals. Um, that stuff gets kind of sour after a while. But then there was the panic movement. There's a little bit of footage of them on the Alejandro Jodorowsky documentary, Constellation Jodorowsky. That spawned people like Alejandro Jodorowsky, but also Fernando Arrabal, who created films like Viva la Muerte. Also a hard view, also with some animal violence. It's a hard watch. It's one of the few movies that I kind of didn't mind not owning. I didn't think I would feel that way, but I did. It made me a little uneasy, but I respect the vision of it. Um, who else was part of that movement? Juan Lopez Moctezuma, who created the incredible film Alucarda, which I've reviewed on this channel. Also did a great movie called Mansion of Madness. And then finally, Roland Topor, who did a lot of different creative things. He wrote the novel The Tenant, which Polanski made into a film. He wrote I believe he wrote the screenplay and scenario for Savage Planet or Fantastic Planet, Planète Sauvage, the animated science fiction film. That's one I'd like to review one day. I have that on Criterion Blu-ray. Harper was involved in a lot of stuff, and I'm even forgetting some key stuff that you'd be like, oh, wow, he did that. But anyway, Burroughs and Gysin didn't do like performance art or music. Gysin did a little music. Burroughs worked with musicians. They were on that same kind of general wavelength. Kind of wavelength David Lynch is on nowadays, pretty much. So this book came out. I loved Burroughs. I bought that video and I watched it over and over. And these movies were hypnotic and to some very irritating. And I could see them being a litmus test. They kind of were. For a while when I lived in this place called Sharon Arms, people would come over and me and my girlfriend would show them to people. And, they really did test kind of your limits. So you're either like fascinated with it or annoyed. There's a lot of repetition, staccato cutting and editing. I'm just going to show you I'm just going to show you my very tiny William Burroughs book collection. It used to be much larger. I lost half my books when I moved in 2015, and I reacquired these, like this one I just showed you. The Job, which is an incredible William Burroughs interview book, and The Adding Machine, which is also an incredible William Burroughs interview book. Burroughs' grandfather invented the adding machine, which morphed into the calculator. So he grew up rather wealthy from that, but he squandered it all on his traveling and drugs and various things, and was pretty much poor as shit by the time he did Naked Lunch. He'd done 2 previous novels, which I don't own, Junkie and Exterminator. So then, nope, I'm picking up the wrong one. Then he did Naked Lunch, which of course this is classic. Briefly indicted for obscenity, but then it was struck down by the Supreme Court, much like Tropic of Cancer and Lolita and a lot of other books. I dread it nowadays, what might happen with this stuff. And he did this incredible trilogy called the Cut Up Trilogy. I don't know if these are in the right order. The Nova Express, which I reviewed the film recently on this channel. The Soft Machine, which the band was named after. And the first one I ever bought, The Ticket That Exploded. This is not the same copy I had in 1992, exact copy, but it is the same edition with this Grove Weidenfeld graphic on it. And then finally there was a gray biography. I read it in like 1999, and I had to replace this. This is a bigger edition than the one I had called Literary Outlaw, The Life and Times of William S Burroughs. This is incredible. And there's another biography by Barry Miles called The Hombre Invisible, I think, but I haven't reacquired that one yet. I'm slack. Just kidding. I'm poor. But anyway, so that leads us to the DVD edition that Genesis put out of the films. He called it simply The Films. He used the a lot instead of the for things. It was kind of a mystical kind of thing. The Films, 1950s to 1960s. Like I said, William S. Burroughs with Brion Gysin and Ian Sommerville. Now, what they don't say on the cover, I'm not sure why, those are the people that are kind of in the films that came up with the scenarios that appear on camera. But Antony Balch is the guy who actually directed these films, and he appears in one of them too. So let me talk a little bit about these films. I'll read a little bit of this background. When writer William S Burroughs and artist Brion Gysin met Antony Balch at the Beat Hotel in Paris at the start of the 60s, they knew they had the ideal person to assist them in translating the ideas that they had explored in experimental art forms onto film. A legendary figure in British film distribution, Balch was renowned for his bizarre experimentation with the European art exploitation he acquired. Now, he's the one responsible for the revival of the movie Freaks, I believe, in the late 60s. It was practically forgotten. From 1932, I've reviewed that on this channel too. Anton LaVey also had a lot to do with promoting the re-release and restoration of Freaks. He had began his career working in carnivals and such, in vaudeville and post-vaudeville as a musician, Anton LaVey, long before he did The Search for the State. And this is back when he knew Marilyn Monroe, and they were briefly lovers. But anyway, yes. So Antony Balch was behind that. Antony Balch did a couple of movies of his own. One's called Bizarre, which I have on DVD. Very obscure, very weird, kind of cool. And then a more mainstream horror movie called Horror Hospital, which is pretty good. I like it, but it pales compared to his other stuff. This stuff is really powerful and weird. It's just there's nothing like it. So let's read some more. He began, and this has got some typos. What it means to say is he, Antony Balch, began his movie-making career collaborating with Burroughs on two shorts, Powers, Open Fire, and The Cut-Ups. The former is a relatively straightforward attempt to capture the essence of Burroughs' writing on film, utilizing key themes, and I've got this sticker on the back that it's hard to read through. Key themes and something or other featured in his books. The latter is an attempt to cinematically represent the art form. Each scene was filmed and edited in its entirety before the cut-up method was applied, cutting the movie into foot-long lengths and splicing them together randomly. So in other words, they would film loose scenarios in their entirety, and then they would cut them up randomly and edit them randomly, and it's like Burroughs cut-up novels and experimental stuff. And I've done some cut-up work too, fiction and mainly poetry. It's like automatic writing, but basically what you're doing is instead of your mind ordering everything, which is cool too, your mind is kind of ordering a basic thing, which might be cool on its own, but then you're chopping it up and letting kind of fate, take over, or in the name of a Psychic TV album, force the hand of chance. And then therefore magic happens. And so you see the cut up words when you read it, and your mind creates closure. Even if it's nonsensical juxtapositions of phrases, your mind creates closure, and you start to create this weird narrative that you're imposing on it. It's a real communicative art form. It's very intuitive. And they tried to do this with film. In film, it's kind of cool because you can do it visually, and it's like all over the map, and your mind is trying to reconcile these images. And of course, this is nothing new. This exact technique was new, but the whole like random images or cutting up sequences and quickly splicing them in fast editing, that was previously done by Stan Brakhage, great underground American filmmaker. And it was also done in the material action movies, the actionism. Kurt Kren would take their crazy performances and film them, which in themselves would be a wild thing to watch. But then he would cut them up with these bizarre, fast staccato cuts and images. And your mind is trying to do it, make it cohere. This kind of stuff was great in the VCR days when you do the frame by frame. Really exciting. Kenneth Anger also did a lot of stuff like this. I love all these guys. It really challenges your brain. It kind of expands your brain. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. Following the death of Antony Balch in 1980, the something untouched and virtually forgotten, the films are untouched and virtually forgotten at his home until the intervention of Psychic TV's genesis P-Orridge, who salvaged and archived them. This unique collection comprises all of the material made during that lengthy period of collaboration between Burroughs, Gysin, and Balch. This label thing, I should have pulled this off years ago. Blah, blah, blah. The finished works, the DVD includes a 50-minute film. This is like an extra. It goes to number 9, which uses cut-ups of film and superimpositions material from the extensive archives of psychic TV, and to which Genesis added the distinctive soundtrack. So Ghost at Number 9 is not one of the original films. It basically takes footage from all the original films, recuts them up, and Genesis reassembles them and then makes a soundtrack. That's incredible. So the main films, Powers Open Fire is like 10 minutes, and yeah, it takes the image of William S Burroughs as the exterminator. He was briefly an exterminator in real life, and wrote a book called Exterminator. The exterminator, but he's kind of a paramilitaristic figure in kind of a apocalyptic setting, and the government's controlling everything, controlling people's minds, and all this kind of crazy. Just you need to read William Burroughs. You'll see what I mean. But I'm trying to explain it as best I can. I don't want to run real long on this video like some I do. But Towers of Fire is great. The soundtrack's cut up. It's got like tribal music and noise mixed together. It's kind of like in a blender. There's William Buys a Parrot, which is literally just a couple minutes film of William Burroughs buying a parrot and like talking to it. No sound. Again, sound, but none of these have any dialogue, or one of them has dialogue and spoken things. And that's the next one, which is Bill and Tony, where William Burroughs and Antony Balch both appear on camera, and you just see their faces, and they blackened out everything around them. So two heads together talking to each other, and then they'll have a head, like one of them saying something back and forth. And what they read is two texts. They read the intro to the movie Freaks. You laughed at them, shuddered at them, but for the accident of birth, they would be as you are, etc., etc. She was once a beautiful woman, and Burroughs does his, Balch does his, and then they exchange their voices, and they dub one's voice into the other, like they dub Balch's voice into Burroughs saying it. And then there's like, they have a thing where they're talking to each other, like, hello, Bill. Hi, Tony. And it's like, where are you, Bill? I'm in London, Tony. Where are you? I'm in a 1920 movie, Bill. And then they show the same sequence interspiced between the single heads. And Bill has Tony's voice and vice versa. And they try to match the lip movements. And it's funny because William Burroughs had this thing when he would speak, when he would finish a word, he would kind of purse his lips. I can't do it in a weird way, very distinctive. And of course, it didn't align with the way Balch spoke, so it was funny. And then the other text they would read a bit of instruction from a Scientology text, and it was like, instruct the pre-clear to reach and stop behind his head, and with pressor beams, elevate himself out. I mean, it's insane. Because, basically one of the ideas of Scientology was to, go backwards in time. Your mind is recorded everything since before you were born. All these accrued things called engrams are creating psychic distress with you. So you need to keep rewinding the tape, clearing the engrams. And when you get all the way to the back, you're a clear, which means you have kind of like a reborn. You have shed all that baggage. Now, the last step before being a clear is a pre-clear. And Hubbard, of course, he was a huckster and a shyster, and he would say things like, even I'm only a pre-clear. I'm like, okay, so people are paying you all this money to become a clear, and you haven't even done it, and he made it all up. It's like a science fiction thing. However, there is some psychological truth to this. I mean, I think that basic premise makes total sense to me, because there's a lot of people who have recited repressed memories and things they heard, things that have impacted their psyche while they were in the womb. They don't remember exact words, but the experiences. I think all that's really fascinating. I think it's all stored in your subconscious. It's just Hubbard took it and decided to make a fortune off it by exploiting people's interest in and need for that kind of psychic deliverance from all that stuff, that they thought they couldn't get from, conventional therapy. So they were duped. But anyway, during this period, Burroughs was a Scientologist. And then a lot of bad stuff started happening with Burroughs and the whatever they call it, the org he was in. That's like one of their outlets, org short for organization, headquarters. And so he wrote this great short book called Naked Scientology, and then they put a death sentence on him. And they used to do that. They would officially, it's like a fatwa or a jihad, like what that fucking uh, those assholes, did to Salman Rushdie for writing the Satanic Verses. He had to flee and become a refugee because he profaned the name of Allah in his book allegedly. And these people are serious. Like, we see Salman Rushdie, you're going to kill him. And it's like, and one of the people I thought who was the most disingenuous and toxic was the musician called Yusuf Islam, who was formerly known as Cat Stevens. Did a great soundtrack for Harold and Maude and some other good music. But he became a Islamist extremist fanatic, and he was interviewed a few times on camera. I've seen him, and he's basically, yeah, we should kill Salman Rushdie. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. The guy should die. That's the way our religion works. Now, the thing about Islam / Stevens is he recently got back into music, recorded an album, and I was working in a music store at the time, and I just ignored it. I didn't feel comfortable condemning him, but I didn't feel comfortable praising him either. I have no problem with Muslims. I just thought, as with any religion that are that extreme and cruel and judgmental, especially it's the monotheistic Abrahamic religions, you don't see millions of pagans and Satanists, and Buddhists going out and murdering and slaughtering people and converting civilizations. It was the monotheists that fucked up the world, and so I didn't like that. So basically, Scientology had a similar thing. If you divulged their secrets or knocked them, yes, they would. Their main recourse was litigation. They're very famously litigious people. They sue the fuck out of everybody. They attempt to silence people. And this is true up to today with David Miscavige and that asshole Tom Cruise. They're just monstrous people. They've done things I won't get into now. Some of you guys may have read about it. Some of you might not believe it, but it's true. So Burroughs was one of the first people that I know of chronologically that I'm aware of in those early 70s that actually published something revealing some of the secrets and denouncing their practices and their authoritarian, controlling, brainwashing system. Yeah, so they're like, Burroughs. So Burroughs had a death sentence for a number of years. I think they rescinded it before he died. And they finally stopped doing that. But I bet if the interview, I think they stopped doing it in the early 1990s, possibly slightly earlier. It was well before Burroughs died. But I think they rescinded it before that on him. I'm sure if interviewed in the 90s, whenever L. Ron Hubbard, before he died, probably would have denied that they did that, but it's true. So anyway, they did a lot of bad things. So yes, this is not about Scientology. Burroughs was a Scientology in this period, and that text is used in one of the films. So you have Towers Open Fire, Bill and Tony, Bill buys a parrot. The Cut Ups, which is much longer, I guess it's like 40 minutes or something, and it's like a lot of footage of Brion Gysin painting, doing his painting, and a lot of talk about the Cut Ups and how the Cut Ups work. And then there's a lot of scenes where this kitty in Sommerville appears. And there's periods where there's some filming in Tangier, and there's some in Paris. And it's them basically just living this bohemian beatnik lifestyle. And just the cinematic method is just kind of, there's a lot of repetition of phrases. Yes, hello, yes, hello, yes, hello. And that goes on for a while. Probably drives some people crazy. And it might not be a very long drive for some people, like me, for instance. But yeah, and then there's Ghost at number 9. So I love this. If you can find it, buy it. I hope it comes out on Blu-ray. And that's it, man. That's another episode down the drain. Long live William Burroughs and Genesis P-Orridge. So take care, friends.